pleased to be joined today by Mary Frances Berry. She's a professor of American social thought and history and African American studies at the University of Pennsylvania. She's the author of 10 books and also a former chair of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Dr. Berry, good of you to join us today. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
I want to ask you in terms of the Justice Department has a position in terms of the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights that has not been held by a woman for some 64 years. It's never been held by an African-American woman. How important is the nomination now that's been put forward by Joe Biden of Kristen Clarke, African-American woman who served in the New York Attorney General's office?
Well, I think it's really fantastic that after all these years, because the Civil Rights Division was set up in 1957 in the Eisenhower administration, to have, for the first time, a woman and as a Black woman to head it. We had two Black men, a professor from Yale, Drew Days, and then one during the Clinton administration, who Patrick, who became the governor of Massachusetts. But there has been a woman. And Kristen Clarke is superbly qualified for the position, which is really important. I mean, obviously, that it's great to have diversity and all that and have different people and so on. But we have to make sure that there are people who can really carry the burden and do the job in a way that helps the people who need to be helped. And the Civil Rights Division is one of the most important functions in the Justice Department.
I'm going to ask you specifically about Kristen Clarke in a moment, but explain why. Why is this position in the Justice Department in terms of being in charge of civil rights so significant and important?
Well, voting rights. Under the civil rights laws, if there is a complaint that people's right to vote is being interfered with, and that the Civil Rights Division in the Justice Department is supposed to investigate and, if necessary, litigate and protect the right to vote. If there is a problem with police brutality, which we seem to have in this country, shooting unarmed people or whatever the complaint is, they have the power and the responsibility to investigate any kind of violation of law that involves the federal government in any way. And most of these law enforcement things do. Or the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which is enforced in other agencies. But when it comes to going to court, when you have to litigate the cases in the federal courts, the Civil Rights Division is the place that takes the lead on all this.
And the Republicans have done a pretty effective job in terms of terminating some nominations in the past. Lani Guinier, who was nominated by Bill Clinton, Republicans depicted her as a welfare queen, rejected her confirmation. Bill Land Lee, who was said to be, he was too much in favor, apparently, of affirmative action. Why is it that over the years Republicans have taken aim at this particular position? And what do you make of the buzzsaw of opposition that they're putting up now to Kristen Clarke?
Well, if you are in a position or suggested for a position that has power, authority, and a reputation of really making change, there are always people who don't want to change. They would prefer to have somebody who either agrees with them that the change you want to make is wrong, or finds reasons to interpret the law in a way that you can't get it done, which is what happened to us famously during the Reagan administration and other administrations in which you had civil rights people running the Civil Rights Division who had never had any experience with civil rights at all. All they knew is that whatever they heard about civil rights, they didn't like it. So now when you propose somebody who has experience, who knows what the laws are and how they should be enforced, then people who don't want to go along with the change, obviously they target the people. And when you're in the limelight, of course, you make a good target.
Well, one of the targets Republicans have tried to sort of pick off with Kristen Clarke is that she has said in the past that perhaps there should be resources reallocated away from policing per se and more towards mental health issues. She has largely sort of stood by that, saying she doesn't support defunding the police, but that we need to do a better job in society of trying to prevent these things on the front end in terms of mental health. Is that a reasonable position in your estimation?
Well, that is a reasonable position, and it is a quite moderate position in a sense. There are people who want to defund the police altogether, which I think is ridiculous. There are places, Los Angeles, for example, and other cities, where they have in fact done something about reallocating resources into areas where it would help the police. Most police departments, I know from all the hearings I did at the Civil Rights Commission and the research I've done, where I subpoenaed police and had them testify on their own, they don't know much about handling people who have mental health problems when they encounter them, or what to do or whatever. And all kinds of things can go wrong. They know that social services would help them to do their jobs better. I've heard that from police. And so when you say shift the resources in a way that will help people and help the police officers do their job better, I mean, that's actually, it's a conservative position, in my opinion.
Some Republicans have also attacked Kristen Clarke because when she was at Harvard in charge of the Black Student Association, she was 19 years old. She invited a professor from Wellesley who gave a speech ostensibly about racism and then spoke out largely about and essentially seemed to defend anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic tropes. Kristen Clarke has now apologized, and she's apologized years ago for this. But is that still fair game for a nomination?
It's not fair game. One of the things you do in colleges and universities, or what you're supposed to do, is listen to all kinds of different opinions and let people listen. They let the students listen, let everybody, talk about issues. And that is the way you learn. You may reject a large part of what you hear, but you don't just pretend that it's not out there in the air and people aren't discussing it. Let people come and make their case. And I believe in open forums, and I don't see anything that's reprehensible about that. But to the extent that someone thinks that that means that she's anti-Semitic, there are all kinds of legal issues that she's been involved in where she supported and defended against anti-Semitism. And I certainly wouldn't make a black mark, so to speak, against her for what she did when she was 19 and she was school and they invited a speaker.
Yeah, I'm not sure anybody would want to go back and look at what you and I were doing back at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, say around April 15th each year because of special laws that they had about marijuana. But in any case, let's move on. I want to talk about the sort of race relations in general. I get the sense in terms of all the attention that the Derek Chauvin trial has generated in terms of the death of George Floyd and whether Derek Chauvin is going to be found guilty or not, that maybe, just maybe, we're at an inflection point in terms of race relations and justice, just in terms of how we're talking about it. Do you see it that way?
Well, we are talking about it more and in a different way. Part of it was the Black Lives Matter protests, and part of it was the graphic presentation that we saw of George Floyd being killed with a knee on the neck, and that comes after so many other things of this kind. But whether or not there's been a real change, we're going to find out. As I watch the trial and comment on it and look at both sides, it seems to me that if he is acquitted, it means that things haven't changed very much. I mean, policing has most progressive police people in departments are in the business of de-escalating when things happen. They don't want to escalate anything and have it get out. That's old-fashioned policing. We're big guys and you have to do what we say. That is not the way that people do it anymore. But there are still some who, and I saw one testifying the other day in the case for the defense, who think that, by God, what I say as a police officer goes. No, we don't want that. And we'll see what happens in this trial. If he ends up getting acquitted, it means that no matter how George Floyd died, and we all saw it with our eyes on it, that things haven't changed as much as we'd like.
Related to what's been going on in Minneapolis, there was the killing of Daunte Wright by a woman police officer who says that she mistook her taser for that she was meant to fire her taser and instead fired her gun, killing Daunte Wright. There have been several nights of protests. What do you make of that case?
Well, the woman is supposed to have been a police officer for 26 years. That's a long time to have experience. It would be like me being a professor for all these years and then saying that I didn't realize that I had to have a lectern up there if I was going to lecture, and I didn't know what that was. And so I picked up the container that the mail people had left in there for their mail instead or something. It just, strains credulity, if I may put it that way, to think that's the case. And if so, it's sad. And they really need better training, even though they've spent millions of dollars in Minnesota on training since the George Floyd murder. So I really am quite sorry that it happened. And I really am having difficulty understanding how and why it happened.
I think so many people share your difficulty in trying to understand this. In general, though, Dr. Bear, are you optimistic about where we're going now in terms of justice and race relations in the United States, or do you have fears like so many others do?
I have fears. Well, one, because our new president, which many Black people and people of goodwill and progressives voted for, Joe Biden, he has not come around yet to understand the extent to which police reform should go. Maybe these events will somehow open his eyes, but we need to have a really clear-eyed look at how we change these things. And there's a lot going on in the country around race and discrimination and diversity that is very positive, but much more needs to be done.
Dr. Mary Frances Berry, she's a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Berry, good of you to join us today. So interesting to talk with you, and thanks for doing this. We appreciate it.
Okay, thanks you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.